Welcome to the UGC EPG Pathshala lecture series in computer science. In this series of lectures, we have been looking at software engineering, and for today's session, I will be discussing on user interface design. Some of the learning objectives for today's session include to focus on what users might need to do to ensure that interfaces has elements that are easy to access, understand and facilitate, the different phases of user interface design and some usability rules. You can ask me a question of why is this usability studied a lot? Today anything that we wanted to look for in the web search engine or any website, we will not be able to get all the information in the same format as and when possible. It is not designed with the same format. Say one window or one particular website, the logout button will be on the top right corner. The other window, the logout button will be in somewhere in the middle, and the other third part of the web search or any website, the logout window will be in the bottom. So the usability becomes very difficult task. So we might have to completely define on how the usability of the system should be, by way of projecting it as in usability engineering statistics. So to talk more about usability, this usability is studied a lot for the ease of learning, for the ease of use, ease of remembrance, subjective satisfaction, efficiency of use, effectiveness of use. And particularly moving on to usability engineering, and it is a process to build usability into the products that we develop. Particularly on the software that we are about to develop, we are about to provide usability. Various methods can be used throughout the design life cycle. Methods can be incorporated into the design process very easily. Methods maintain focus on user throughout the design. Why usability engineering is not very common or not done regularly? Developers typically believe that it takes too long for the usability or the usability engineering to be performed, and it can be expensive at times. It at times may be crucial to do or not critical for the development. They can afford to learn about user problems during the life use. Also, developer may not know how to do it. So this is a typical case that we have taken. Typical website usability problems include navigation. So that means knowing where you are and where you wanted to or what you wanted to find, finding what you want. And we may not at times able to find out the structure of the website and most probably the layout of the website also. This needs sufficient white space, use of largest graphics. So this has preliminary given us a reason for getting into user-centered design. So this user-centered design is a new strategy of innovating, which is not as replicated to another website that is already available. So we understand users by doing a little bit of a research. We define use cases wherein we define the interaction among the use cases. We design the user interface, we develop prototypes and evaluate, we develop it finally. This user-centered design is a dialogue between the customer and the designer. And this has got a rule of thumb. The developer has to get to know and understand the users, build an application applying the usability principles, test designs by observing users in a real work setting, environment and workload. Some of the usability principles that I have highlighted are layout, which is nothing but the interface should be a series of areas on the screen that are used consistently for different purposes. For example, the top area of the command and navigation, the middle area is for the information that we are about to provide to be in sort of an input or output, and the bottom area is for the status information. If you look at a typical website, the top area is kept open for the different buttons or the drag down button that we have given, and the middle area is given for us to work on, say, providing the user information. If you want to access your mailbox, it provides all your mail details, and the lowest part of the information will give you a detail on who has developed and how many times you have logged into the site and other informations. Content awareness, where users should always be aware of where they are in the system and what information is being displayed. And we can provide aesthetics to the system by way of showing interfaces should be functional and inviting the users through careful use of white space, colors and fonts. There is often a trade-off between including enough white space to make the interface look pleasing without losing so much space that important information does not fit onto the screen. We can have user experiences also, although ease of use, ease of learning often lead to similar design decisions. There is sometimes a trade-off between the two. Say in case of novice users or infrequent users of software will prefer ease of learning, whereas frequent users will prefer ease of use. One other principle is the consistency. We have to maintain consistency in the interface design modules, users to predict what will happen before they perform a function. It is one of the most important elements in ease of learning, ease of use and aesthetics, and minimal user effort. I need not search for a particular menu in the complete website. So the interface should be simple to use. Most designers plan on having no more than 3 mouse clicks from the start menu until the user performs work. The graphical user interface design is multidisciplinary. A team, if I wanted to design a complete user interface, then I might need a team which consists of analyst, designer, technology expert, graphic artist, social and behavioral scientist, programmer and so on. So the basic principles when we are look at the user interfaces are: assume users have not read the manual, have not attended training, do not have external help readily at hand. So most of us are like that. When we are used to a website, when we look at a website, we wish to understand most of it from the user interface itself rather than looking at its document. So all the controls should be clear and understandable and placed in an intuitive location on the screen. So this is the complete usability design process where we have a use case scenario development that gets on to the interface structure design, interface standards design, interface design prototyping, interface evaluation, and it's a cyclic process. When we look at the use scenario development, we already know about the use cases, but then use scenarios are just single thread through a use case and it makes our work much simpler. This is the user interface structure and flow control where we have a main menu. As I've already said, between 3 mouse clicks I should reach to my destination. So main menu, selecting a menu A, which is another window, and selecting a form A, B, or I have to go for a report. Likewise, within 3 specific clicks I might have to reach the destination. If it takes more than that, the patience level of the user might go off. Interface standard design. The interface standards are the basic design elements that are common across the screens, forms and reports within the system. Interface design prototyping. The prototyping can be developed in terms of building a storyboard. It can even be a HTML prototype, it can be a language prototype, it can be an interface evaluation like heuristics, you can have a walkthrough, it can be interactive, and we can have a formal usability testing again. Creating a user interface prototype has low fidelity prototypes are most favorably good. For example, paper prototype, you can use Visio or HTML or PPT as a prototype again. Looking at the interface and the dialog design, the team needs to worry about the layout or the buttons, text, table data, and most often layouts that are being used, and the structure of the data entry in terms of tab order. So if in case I am to press a tab, in which order it has to perform, whether it is from right to left or left to right, and so on. Controlling the data input, validation and format controls, feedback, prompting status, warning and error messages, and finally dialog sequencing. So if in case if you need more clarification on the dialogues, a sequence of interactions between the system and the user is supposed to be a dialogue. A dialogue design involves designing a dialogue sequence, building a prototype, assessing the usability. We may have to look at the GUI design guidelines. where we will have user in control. We might have to check for the consistency. We will look for personalization and customization of data, forgiveness, feedback, aesthetics and usability. First, if you look at the user in control, rather the user's perception of control, there should not be no mothering principle. There's a no mothering principle. User should feel that they initiate all the actions on their own. So feedback is necessary for this type of work. And if you look at consistency to be maintained, the conformance of graphical user interface vendor standards, a graphical user interface developer must not be too creative and innovative in the interface design. The conformance to the naming, coding and other GUI related standards developed internally by the organization. Looking for the consistency, this includes the naming and coding of menus, action buttons, screen fields. Say for example, for login, it's been a common name that we may have to maintain over a period. So that becomes consistent for any number of forms that we create. It also includes standards for placement of screen, objects and consistent use of other GUI elements across the applications. The other design principle is personalization and customization. GUI personalization is customization for personal use. For example, a vendor reorders and resizes columns in a grid, displays and saves these changes as preferences. GUI customization is an administrative task of tailoring the software to different group of users. Example, when a program operates differently for novice and advanced users. And to look at the other design principle called forgiveness, a good interface allows users to experiment and make mistakes in a forgiving way. Forgiveness encourages interface exploration because the user is allowed to take erroneous routes that can be rolled back, even to the starting point if in case necessary. I can go back to the starting. So there need to be an reverse arrow mark which can take me to the top of the page. Forgiveness implies facilities such as multi-level undo operation and ability to cancel long-running actions. This most of us would have experienced when we were doing a lot of searches. And finally, there is an important component which is required, which is called feedback. This feedback guideline is a spin-off of the first guideline. The user is in control. To be in control involves knowing what's going on when the control is temporarily within the program. The developer should build visual and or audio cues for every user event. There should be a weight indicator which should mention the appropriate feedback to the user. And finally, this should provide aesthetics and usability. Aesthetics is to give a visual appeal for the forms that we create, reports that we create or to the complete website that we create. Usability is about use, simplicity, efficiency, reliability in using the complete of interface. The issues that we are about to consider when we are about to do the aesthetics include the fixation and movement of human eye, the use of colors that we provide on the forms, the sense of balance and the symmetry, the alignment and spacing of elements, sense of proportion, grouping of related elements, the responsiveness of the system, simplicity, additional and related guideline. So if you look at these three common logos that you have seen, if you look at the first logo, it is like horizontal lines that are given with appropriate spaces that made out to be a very good logo. For usability to be completely picturized, there are 10 global golden rules that are to be followed. A great set of guidelines created by Jakob Nielsen in his book Usability Engineering. Rule 1 indicates use simple and natural dialogue or language. User interfaces should be simplified as much as possible, since every additional feature or item of information on a screen is one more thing to learn, one more thing to misunderstand and one more thing to search through, and GUI should not overdo it with color. So As much as possible, you make the interfaces look very simple in terms of color, in terms of the button size, in terms of things that we are about to learn. Use language that fits the user group. So if you would have looked at some website, there can be shift between multiple languages which may get confusing when the forms are being designed. So use language that fits the user group, whether it could be on English or on the native language. The language should be based on the user's language and not on the system oriented terms. So translation from one language to the another is more than just words. Time, currency, phrases, metaphors, measurements, etc. must fit the culture of the user group. Minimize the load on short-term memory. User should not have to remember information from one part of the dialogue to the other. So when I have shifted from one dialogue to the other screen or from one screen to the other screen, I need not remember complete of information what I have provided in the previous screen. Instructions to use of the system should be visible and easily retrievable whenever appropriate. Rule 4. Make the graphical user interface coherent and consistent. So this is what has to be given more importance when designing the usability of any specific when creating a design. The same action should always have the same effect. Users will feel confident in using the system and they will feel encouraged to try out explanatory learning because they already have part of the knowledge needed to operate new parts of the system. So they wish to have iterative nature of what they wish to create, and the system needs to be very consistent till the end. Rule 5. Give the ability to use shortcuts. So there should be appropriate buttons for creating shortcuts. Say when you have used Word, to get to know about more of the shortcuts, when we press the Alt key, it gives us an indication on what kind of shortcut we can move from one thing to the other thing. Say for example, if we wanted to copy, we see Control C, and if we want to paste, Control V. So those kind of shortcuts can also be created for the specific software, which is pretty much appreciable. So these shortcuts are being an accelerators unseen by the novices, may often speed up for the level of activity the interaction of expert users such as function keys, command keys, macros, etc. Rule 6. Give feedback to the user's actions. So whatever the user he performs as an action, give him a feedback. So there it may be through a command prompt window, the feedback can be given to him. The system should always keep users informed about what is going on through appropriate feedback within a reasonable point of time. So in case if he has entered a wrong value, there should be an appropriate window popping out saying the value that you have entered should contain this kind of values, not the values that you have inserted. Within the same point, 0.1 second user feel the system is responding immediately. If it has been got at the same time, then the user might feel it has been responsive so immediately. 1 second it is about to limit user's flow of thought, will say interrupted. So if it takes a longer period in time to project it out in terms of user actions, it says this might be interrupt for the next level of a flow. And if it takes 10 seconds, it is about the limit to keep users attention focused on the dialogue. So the user may not be focusing on the dialogue, he can shift to the other pages as and when required. Rule 7. Avoids error situations. So ask the user if he or she really wants to do the action, especially if the action leads to serious consequences. Avoid having two similar commands in the interface. Say you need not reciprocate with similar commands for multiple operations and perform that too. Commands whose actions are opposite should not be placed close to each other. Say for example, Control C and Control V are too close, then we might have a possibility that we can do an alternate. So the buttons which are very close to each other should not perform two opposite functionalities. Rule 8. Give clear exit marks. So any which ways when we wanted to log out or when we wanted to come out of a particular system, the exit marks has to be very typical and it should be differentiated in terms of maybe color or the button size. So users often choose actions by mistake and will need a clearly marked emergency exit to leave the unwanted state. So in any case, if it could be an emergency or it could be a natural sign out, there should be a clear mark which distinguishes on every page where to come out, to leave unwanted state without having to go through an extended dialog. Cancel should be offered when the operation will take a long time. In the navigation bars, the user should be able to keep the appropriate backup also. Rule 9. Give clear and understandable error messages. So any messages that has been popped up as a part of error message, that needs to be typically clear. It should not be a message which can be empty, that does not give us a clear understanding of where we have gone wrong. So give a clear and understandable error message. So this should be phrased clearly and avoid obscure codes. Messages should be precise, not vague and general. Messages should be constructively to help the users. Messages should be polite and not intimidate to the user or put blame explicitly on the user, saying that you have done wrong. Illegal, fatal action, job aborted phrases should not be used. And finally, the last rule, which is to give a clear help and understandable documentation. This plays a vital role in the entire usability principle, but then most often users may not look at the entire documentation unless or until it is required. Information should be easy to search. It should be focused on the user's task. List the concrete steps that should be carried out. Whenever we are developing a user manual, the user manual has to give a clear understanding on, each and every menu or each and every button that we have created or each and every forms that we have done on the particular page, and appropriate help on the login and the logout. All such information have to be provided in large. So the help manual should not be too large in a sequence. In short, in this particular session, we have started looking at how to bring about the aesthetics of the system by mentioning the usability of the system. Whenever we talk on the usability of the system, please do keep in mind we are bringing out a system which is easy for everything, for all different types of users, for all different community of users, how effective, how easy the system is about to be. So in this particular session, we have looked at usability and usability engineering, and we have looked at what are the common issues that this usability engineering matches with, and we have looked at several guidelines that we may have to follow, starting from the various color codes and the formats and the fonts, languages that we may have to use as and when appropriate the system has to be developed. And finally, we have looked at 10 different golden rules that we may have to follow on the usability and the usability engineering perspective. Thank you.